to all the STEM camps out there watching the live stream. Today we have our expert, Tim Allan, and he's an instructor at the School of Transportation at Centennial College, and he's calling in from Toronto today. So as you know, today is Hydraulics Day, and the campers are experimenting with hydraulics kits, learning about levers and simple machines and fluid studies. So before we get to the campers' questions on Twitter, Tim, could you tell us a bit more about what you do at Centennial College and maybe start by explaining the concept of hydraulics?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Tim Allan, and I teach here at Centennial College in the heavy equipment program. And what I mean by heavy equipment is all the big yellow construction equipment you see on the side of the road, bulldozers and excavators and all those kinds of large machines. So those machines use lots of hydraulics. That's what kind of separates them from everything else. They're very big on hydraulics. So the actual word hydraulic, if you look at it, that's how you spell hydraulic. And if you take this part of the word right here, hydra, what that means is fluid. So what hydraulics is using fluid to transmit energy. So when we put these systems on machines, what happens is a pump moves some fluid and it makes the machine move. And so that's what hydraulics are. It's using fluids to move energy around.
Excellent. So I see a camp just joined us. Where are you joining us from?
New Hamburg.
Oh, hi, New Hamburg. Great
Hello,
to have you
Hamburg.
with us. Maybe we can go right to you. Did you have a question about hydraulics for Tim, our expert today?
Zach, do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, you say it into the screen.
What's hydraulic?
Just explain it.
Well,
just missed the explanation.
Yeah, I guess you joined just a little bit late, so maybe Tim, if you could sort of go over your intro again, I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. So hydraulics, and let me write the word down for you. That's the word hydraulic. And this part of the word right here means fluid. So what hydraulics are is using fluid to do work or to move energy around. And you guys, whether you realize it or not, you use hydraulics all the time. Every time you use one of these things, you put some pressure in there and you move fluid and you get work done by chasing your friends around the backyard. This actually works on hydraulics.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, so I'll go to our first question from Twitter. You sort of just introduced what hydraulics are, Tim, but Luxembourg would like to know, how do hydraulics work?
Okay,
And
so
that was
hydraulics,
Waterdown.
like what we're doing here.
Hi, Waterdown.
Hello.
hello.
All right, so I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
Our camp in Tilsonburg would like to know, how do hydraulics work?
So hydraulics work on the principle of moving fluid. So something like this. This is a syringe that you guys probably seen before. And what happens is when I put force on the end of this syringe, we can make fluid move. So when I pull in, the fluid comes in, and when I put force on it, the fluid comes back out. Well, what I can do is I can take that fluid that comes out and I can harness that fluid and do things with it. So if I put that fluid into a tube right here and I push on this, you'll see the fluid goes through the tube and makes the other syringe work. This is how hydraulics work. You put a force on one side, it goes through a hose, and the force comes out the other side to make things move. And you can move that. You can put this hose as long as you want. This hose can be way at the other end of the room, and you can move something just by doing this. So that's primarily how hydraulics work. In a machine, it's a little bit different, but the concept is the same. We just don't use things this small. We use really big things when we go and talk on a machine.
Oh, that's awesome. So related to that, our camp in Brantford asks, how does the pressure move the cylinders in a machine with hydraulics?
Okay, so in a machine, you have something like this. This is a pump. So this would be driven by the engine in the machine. So when the engine's running, it turns this thing here. And what happens is this pump It
Did she fall asleep?
Can't hear him, can we?
Oh. Tim has frozen. Tim, can you hear us? Hi.
Can you guys still see me?
Hi, Tim. Yeah, your video froze and we couldn't hear you. Could you just sort of repeat your last thought there?
Sure. So the question was, how do hydraulics work on a machine? Well, on a large machine, you have a thing that looks like this, and it's called a pump. And the engine spins this part of the pump. And what it does is it makes the fluid move just like our syringe did. So when the fluid from the pump comes out, it goes to one of these, this device, and the person in the cab moves this lever back and forth. And by moving the lever back and forth, he can send the fluid out to the device that actually makes the machine move. And that's called a cylinder.
Awesome. So let's go to Waterdown that just joined us a moment ago. Is there a question in Waterdown for Tim?
Some other questions you might have about hydraulics. Well, what's your question?
Yes, we have one.
Okay.
If there were two syringes and
Oh,
there was a wire that was connecting one, like, and there was a wire in both syringes, and there was a wire connecting them.
Waterdown, we're having trouble hearing you. Could you point the camera at the camper and just have them speak into the mic a little louder,
Yep.
please?
Okay, just a little bit louder.
If there was two syringes and one wire that was connecting them, and there was not enough room to put the wire in the other syringe, would the wire break or would the syringe break?
That is an excellent question. In our case, because the syringes are so light duty, they would just fall apart. But in the real world, we actually have a device in there that takes that extra oil and puts it back to where it came from. So if there's too much oil, which is the fluid that we use, if there's too much oil, then that oil goes someplace else instead of falling on the ground. Because if it falls on the ground, it makes a mess, and it's not very nice. So that oil, if there's too much of it, it goes back to where it started from.
Oh, yeah, good question. Thanks. So we have another question on Twitter from our camp in Ingersoll. They want to know, are hydraulics used in robots?
Hydraulics are used in robots a lot. Because hydraulics are by using hoses to hook up hydraulics, you can make them very flexible, and you can put hydraulics in all kinds of places just by running hoses to them. So you can have all kinds of robots that doing all kinds of stuff. You can make things spin, you can make things get longer and shorter, you can move things around. So actually hydraulics are very popular in robots.
Awesome. Also from Ingersoll, they wanted to know, how much weight can hydraulics lift?
Well, and that's an excellent question. So the answer is almost unlimited, depending on how big you make it. And let me explain that just a little bit here. So this syringe, right now this syringe is very small. So we can have a small syringe and we can put water in it, or we can have a really big syringe and put water in it. This syringe only lifts a little bit. This syringe can lift a lot because the power of hydraulics depends on how big you make the cylinders. And when we talk about cylinders, that's the same as a syringe. In the real world, this is what a cylinder looks like. So this is only a small one. These things get really big. And the bigger you make it, the more it'll lift. So all of it depends on how big the cylinder is and how much pressure you put in. So if I push really hard on this syringe, it'll lift a lot of weight. If I only push lightly on that syringe, it'll only lift a little bit of weight. So there's two things that depend on how much it'll lift, but you can make it lift as much as you want.
All right. Let's go back to New Hamburg. I see a bunch of campers gathered around. Is there another question for Tim? Hi.
Hello.
Oh, when was it hydraulics? Okay, we'll let Kristen.
When was the first hydraulics made?
When was the first hydraulics made? Well, it was a long time ago. Back in the really old days, back in the days of the Romans, they didn't know it was called hydraulics, but they used hydraulics to do things like to turn water wheels to grind grain, and all kinds of things that we use water for, which is the use of using fluid as an energy. And so we didn't call it hydraulics back then, but modern hydraulics have been around on machines for probably about probably about 75 years.
Oh, wow. Good question. Thank you. Going back to Twitter, our camp in Dundas would like to know, are some hydraulic systems run by other fluids besides water?
Well, and that's a good question. Most of our machines, this machine, for example, this is an excavator, and this machine runs using oil. And the reason they use oil is for a couple of reasons. One is it keeps all the pieces lubricated so that everything moves very smoothly. And the other reason is because water would make steel rust. So they use oil, and it keeps the steel. These are the cylinders. These things here are the cylinders that are like the syringes. And if you put oil in those, it makes this thing longer and shorter, and it keeps it from rusting inside by using oil, which is mostly what we use.
Okay. Tilsonberg wants to know if hydraulics can use different liquids other than water and oil. Is there perhaps another possibility?
Well, any liquid would work. Actually, the blood inside your body is like a hydraulic system. Your heart is the pump, and your heart puts pressure on fluid, and that fluid moves through your body, and that's the same principle as hydraulics. So anytime you have a liquid and you put pressure on it and you make that liquid move, you're using hydraulics.
Oh, okay, cool. So let's go back to water down. I see some campers there. Is there a question for Tim?
Okay, we got one.
Okay.
How long can an excavator work for?
I'm sorry?
How long can they stay and how long can they work for? Or how long does it take to break down?
Well, they actually work pretty good. I mean, as long as you keep putting fuel in it, it'll go years and years and years. This excavator here would probably last 20 or 25 years. You do some repairs in the meantime, and that's what we do here is we teach students how to fix these machines or machines like this. So as a student here, you would learn how all the hydraulic systems on this machine works, and you'd be able to repair it. So when it did break, that's your job would be to fix that.
Okay, kind of a related question here from Dundas. They wanted to know what happens if a hydraulic system runs out of fluid?
That's an excellent question. If it runs out of fluid, the pump can't get any more fluid, and what happens is this thing loses its lubrication. Like we said, the oil keeps it all lubricated so it spins very smoothly. When that happens, all the pieces in here start to wear out, and if they wear out very quickly without any oil. So when we run out of oil in a machine, that's when all the pieces start to wear out and the whole machine stops working.
Okay. Also from Dundas, do we sometimes use hydraulics in our house?
Hydraulics in your house? Well, you have water in your house. What would they use hydraulics for in a house? I know in my house, the heating system in my house is done by putting hot water through radiators. And the pump inside there would be moving that water. Now, we don't use it to do work. Where else could you use? If you had your garden hose, if you had to take the garden hose outside and you sprayed against something to say you're washing the driveway, for example, the pressure of that water and the pressure of the flow from that water coming out of the hose washing the driveway is a form of hydraulics. You're using that fluid as an energy medium to move something, and that's what hydraulics is.
Oh, okay, cool. Let's go back to New Hamburg again. Do you guys have another question?
Anybody have a question? What's your question, Jack? Yeah, we'll let Emma ask a question. Yeah. Speak loudly, okay?
What if
You need to be louder.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Jack. Come on over, Jack.
what kind of
Right here.
what kind
You gotta speak right
what
into
are they
your
called again?
Yeah.
hydraulic.
What kind of hydraulics are there?
What
So
kind
the-
of hydraulics are there? Well,
Are there-
there's hydraulics. For example, on our excavator, there's hydraulics that make this piece go in and up and down, and there's hydraulics that make the track spin around. So we can have hydraulics do things in a couple different ways. It can make things longer and shorter. It can make cylinders longer and shorter, and it can make motors turn. So those are mostly the two ways we use hydraulics.
Okay. How about water down? I see some more campers watching in water down. Do you guys have another question there?
Yes, we've got one. There we go.
Awesome.
Is it the more dense the liquid, the easier it is for it to work?
That is an excellent question. So the density of a fluid, the denser it is, the more ability it has to transfer energy. So a thick oil would do somewhat a better job than a thin oil for a whole bunch of reasons. But you're right, the density of a liquid does have an effect on how well hydraulics work.
Good question. Let's see. I see more curious campers back in New Hamburg. Can we go back to you for another question?
Yeah. Emma, speak loudly.
Oh, come up right to the microphone, please.
Okay.
What if hydraulics were missing fluid?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
What if hydraulics didn't liquid in them?
So she's wondering, what if hydraulics didn't have fluid in them?
If it didn't have fluid in it, it wouldn't work. Now that's not complete. Well, if it doesn't have fluid in it, it's got fluid in it. It's called hydraulics. If it doesn't have fluid, if it's only got air in it, it's kind of the same thing, but it's called pneumatics. So here's two more syringes. I don't have any oil in them. I just have air. But when I push on this, you can see it does the same thing by moving that one up. It doesn't do as good a job though, because air, you can compress air. You can put it under pressure and make it smaller. Whereas fluids, you can't. So when you're using a fluid to do this, everything moves much better. When you do it, this is called pneumatics, when you use air. And this one is called hydraulics, because we're using a fluid. But other than that, they work kind of the same way.
Cool. So I have another question here from our camp in Dundas. What would you call a person that studies hydraulics?
Well, there are people who design hydraulic systems, and they're called hydraulic engineers. The people who use hydraulics in their everyday job would be people like heavy equipment mechanics and industrial millwrights, people that work in big factories, fixing the big machines in factories. Airplane mechanics would use hydraulics. So the legs, all the control surfaces on an airplane are moved with hydraulics. So airplane mechanics would have to know how to use that. Even car mechanics. The brake system in your parent's car is done with hydraulics. When your parents step on the pedal to make the brakes come on, what happens is it transfers that fluid to the wheels and makes the brakes stop. So anybody who fixes any of these machinery would have to know how hydraulics work.
Okay, thank you. So we're coming to the end of our time for this call, but I was wondering, Tim, if you had any questions or anything you wanted to add about hydraulics or a project that you're working on?
Well, it's the project we're working on. We built a kind of a small, kind of like this excavator, but we built one really small. And we put a pump on a bicycle, on a stationary exercise bicycle. And when the students pedal the bicycle and they move the lever, we put some of these controls on it. So when the students move this lever back and forth, they can make the crane move by pedaling it. And it's lots of fun. We call it our pizza-powered bicycle crane because it takes the energy of pizza and it converts it over to make things lift up and down with our little excavator that we have on a bicycle.
Oh, wow, that sounds really cool. Let's go for one final question in water down. Is there a question we can end with? One more question.
Oh, not here. We'll have to defer to the other sites.
Okay. New Hamburg, are you still with us?
We are. Anybody have a question?
Okay.
Bryn?
If you have hydraulics in a tractor, what would happen?
Well, you could lift lots of things. That's what these machines are meant to do. These machines are meant to lift things that are very heavy. So hydraulics allows you to use a little bit of energy to lift something very heavy. And it makes it so that anything you want to move around, as big or small, can be done using hydraulics on a tractor.
Very cool. Thanks for that question. So we're sort of out of time for a call with Tim, but Tim, thank you so much for telling us more about hydraulics and showing us all those demonstrations. That was really awesome. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, New Hamburg and Waterdown, for joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.